All right, so we're recording. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Beth and I am the volunteer and tour manager for the Friends of Laurel Hill. And tonight you are in for a treat for a special lecture. What's really fun about virtual lectures is we can talk about people buried at both Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West because we don't have to be in one physical location over the other. So tonight, our tour guide extraordinaire, Joe Lex, is going to take you through a journey on our residents who have sat for Thomas Eakins or his other Laurel Hill connections. So oh wait, a little bit of a housekeeping. We are in webinar format tonight, which means that you will be able to see and hear Joe. And I will be turning off my camera, but Joe and I are the only ones that you'll be able to see and hear from. We have a Q&A function. If you have any questions along the way, I'll be monitoring that. And I do also see there is a webinar chat as well. So I'll try to keep an eye on both. And if you have questions along the way, or you can save your questions till the end, we'll do a Q&A at the end. But without further ado, oh, and I'm recording this and I'll send out the link to everybody tomorrow if you want to rewatch it again. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Joe Lex. Thank you, Joe.
Yes, and I will remind you that another advantage of a virtual tour is when you're talking about an artist, and you can put a whole lot of samples of those that work up there. This was a labor of love. I was not a huge Thomas Eakins fan when I started this, but I knew there were a lot of connections. And now I've just been totally absorbed in Eakins for the last couple of months. I found 31 people who are buried at Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West who were painted by Eakins, and I found the paintings for all but one of them and photos for all but a few of them. This is my podcast that I do for the cemetery, All Bones Considered. Don't worry if the screen up there is blocking part of the QR code. That's okay. You'll see the QR code again at the end, but the QR code will take you straight to the podcast. All Bones Considered, ABC, Laurel Hill Stories, BBB, Biographical Bites from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories. Remind you that you can do self-guided tours at Laurel Hill East. Download the app for the most popular sites. These are the ones that are on the current tour that is up there. It's a really well done tour. I highly recommend it. But you can see some familiar faces there. And there's a few more familiar faces there. And nobody on this tour was painted by Thomas Eakins. Everybody we're going to talk about today is, well, there's a bunch of them right there. Everybody from Icicle Fissler to J. Um, bleh, Joshua Lippincott, and 6 people from the Agnew Clinic. So let us get started. Just a little bit on Eakins himself. I'm not going to get too involved in Eakins' life story because he's not buried with us. He's buried over at the Woodlands. American realist painter. He was a photographer, he was a sculptor, and he was a fine arts educator. Probably almost better known as a teacher than as a painter. I was surprised at how low the cost is for many of his paintings. I'll point some out as we go through this. He painted hundreds of portraits throughout his life. A lot, they were usually friends. He was independently wealthy and he didn't have to paint for money. So he usually painted friends, family members, prominent people in the arts, the sciences, the clergy. He rarely took commissions. Um, and when he did, it was a very special thing. This is a picture of Eakins when he was young. What is his background? Well, he's kind of like me. He's an American mongrel. He was the first child of Carolyn Cowperthwaite Eakins, who was English and Dutch, and Benjamin Eakins, who was a writing master and a calligraphy teacher of Scottish and Irish ancestry. His studio is still there. It's at 1729 Mount Vernon Street. just a short distance from what's now Masterman High School. This is his studio on the fourth floor. This is what his father built for him to keep him at home. He did his first large-scale portrait, Catherine. The subject, Catherine Crowell, is obviously in dim light and you can't see it, but she's plainly getting down here. Now, I manipulated this a little bit so you can get a better picture of it, but get used to looking at this. It's like Eakins slathered everything with a mahogany tint. Everything has that sort of, not everything, but most of these paintings you're going to see have that deep umber mahogany feel to them with the colors. He started with what some scholars call a naked series in 1883. He took nude photos of several of his students, male and female, and he brought in professional models to show real human anatomy from from specific angles. He painted more naked men than he did naked women. I can find only 2 nude females in his set of 500 or so paintings, whereas there are a lot of nude males and semi-nude males. When he died, it was not a very big death notice. He was not fully recognized for many years. He was considered brash, carefree, provocative, outrageously controversial. We're not going to go into that. That's an hour in itself about the controversies that swirl around Thomas Eakins. But with all of that, he was a provincial artist. John Singer Sargent came to town on some special mission in the 1890s. And when dinner was being arranged, somebody said, should we invite Eakins? And John Singer Sargent said, who's Eakins? He didn't even know who he was. More than 500 works of his are cataloged, and more than he's buried at Woodlands Cemetery. Now, the first appropriate one is a watercolor, and it's not that mahogany, although you can see he's starting to get into that up here with the mahogany. This is Weston Dixon Wes Fissler. He's buried at Laurel Hill East. He was painted in 1879. The original sketch and the painting are at the Rhode Island School of Design. His nickname was the Icicle. He was born in Camden. His father was mayor of Camden. He went to private schools. He played a gentleman's game of baseball. Gentleman's baseball was in its final days as professional leagues were starting. In fact, you will see in this picture of the 1870 Athletic, notice no S. You will see that misspelled in a majority of articles I've seen about the Philadelphia team in 1870. Everybody wants to put the S on the end of it. This isn't even the team that evolved into the Athletics. This is the team that evolved into the Phillies. But you will notice not only is Wes Fissler there is Al Reach. Al Reach with Ben Scheib is the guy who started the Athletics. He was a huge sports equipment manufacturer. So these guys were very important in the early days of baseball in Philadelphia. Wes Fissler, Icicle, got that nickname because he never sweat, no matter how much stress. He always wore a fresh collar and a tie when he played baseball. He was a gentleman, and he never broke a sweat. Here we go again. Here's Al Reach right here. Here's Wes Fissler here. I didn't recognize any other names in this. Wes Fissler holds the distinction in a game in 1871 with the American Association Athletic. See, again, there's no S there. They played Boston at a field on what's now Cecil B. Moore, at the old baseball field there. And this was the first day of the season for the American Association. So because everybody else got rained out that day, all of these teams are on the East Coast, and Philly happened to have clear skies that day. So they played the first game of what later was declared the first game in Major League history. And you will see another name here, Lon Knight. Alonzo Knight was the pitcher. So Alonzo Knight was not painted by Eakins. However, he is buried at Laurel Hill East in an unmarked grave. And Lon Knight threw out the first pitch in Major League history. Wes Fisler scored the first home team run in Major League history. You notice Boston scored first in the second inning. The Athletic in the bottom of the second scored, and somehow Wes was the guy who scored that run. So there's still arguments about this, but there's every possibility that he scored the first home team run. Even more important is that Lon Knight threw the first pitch in Major League history. Wes had an unmarked grave for many years, and a distant third cousin, twice removed or something, who's a genealogist, discovered him and decided, well, that's not right. So she went to great efforts to have this stone made and placed, and it's a really nice stone. So that is Icicle Fisler. He is the first one we're going to talk about. Next is J. Harry Lewis. J. Harry Lewis was painted in 1876 when he was 36 years old. He was a boyhood friend of Eakins. He grew up about a block from the Eakins house. They frequently went hunting together. They went on sailing expeditions together. I could find nothing about him except that he wasn't a very good businessman. I found two reports a few years apart about bankrupt businesses that he was involved in. But when he died in 1909, there wasn't even an obituary. Here's another time he went bankrupt. And to add insult to injury, he's buried somewhere in here. There's no marker. You might have seen this picture in the past. This is one of Eakins. Well, this is Eakins' first important painting. For one thing, he used photography to help paint this because he used photos done by Edward Muybridge, the weird Britisher who did all the experiments with movement and film. But he used Muybridge's film of horses trotting to determine where the paws should go here, the hoof should go here. This is called A May Morning in the Park. This is in Fairmount Park, and Fairman Rogers is the man up here with the look. He is in charge. This was painted in 79, 80, and it exists, it lives at PMA right now, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Fairman Rogers was a civil engineer. He was an educator. Most of all, he was an equestrian. He was a professor of civil engineering at UPenn from 1855 to 71. He was a trustee on the board from 71 to 86. He co-founded the School of Veterinary Sciences at the university. At age 24, he was elected to the American Philosophical Society. He was also a member of the Academy of Natural Sciences, charter member of the National Academy of Sciences. He was with the cavalry during the Civil War, and he worked in the engineering staff of John Reynolds, who was killed the first day of Gettysburg, who's buried in Lancaster. And the other big man that he worked with was Baldy Smith, General William Baldy Smith, who was buried at Arlington. He fought at Antietam and Gettysburg. He was a member of the 1st City Troop City Cavalry, the 1st Troop City Cavalry, and he was elected captain of the 1st City Troop after the war. He helped create what is now known as the Union League of Philadelphia, but he's best known as a horseman and a gentleman. He was a model for a book of rules. There's actually a book of rules on horsemanship and how to hold your whip to indicate different things. If you're going to make a turn, if you're trying to signal to somebody and what have you. His collection of horse-related stuff was huge. It ended up going to the UPenn Library, more than 1,000 titles, Foundation for Scholarly Study of the Horse. This is his sister. This is Kate, Helen Kate. She was married to the Shakespearean scholar Horace Howard Furness, who was brother of the PAFA commission winning architect, Frank Furness. Fairman Rogers has a fairly simple ledger stone in K section at Laurel Hill East. He was, as you can see, he was visiting in Vienna when he died. This is called the swimming hole. There are more naked men in this picture than there are total naked women that Thomas Eakins painted. This is 6 men and a dog out for a skinny dip. This is a great painting. Talcott Williams, Benjamin Fox, J. Laurie Wallace, Jesse Godley. This is the guy that we're interested in. Doing diving is George Reynolds. Down here is Harry the Irish Setter. And over here in the corner, sneaking up on everybody, is Thomas Eakins. This is Jesse Godley as a child. He's in a kilt. I'm not sure what that means. Jesse Godley, as you'll notice, did not live to be very old. He was, I mentioned Edward Muybridge before. He was the model for this. When Muybridge was doing his experiments with motion and having several cameras set up next to each other that could be hit by a tripwire, and then he could merge all of these together and show motion. Godley was the model here. Godley was the model here also, both in 1884. Unfortunately, Godley died at 27, and I can't find out why. I can't find his death certificate. I can't find any announcement in the newspaper. But the year after he died, there was a PAFA exhibit of his material. He was all of those, I'm sorry, all of these guys, by the way, are students of Eakins. This is one of his solo works I could find that I could get a fairly good capture on. Just a sample of his sculpture. And I went to look for his grave, and guess what? It's right there. He doesn't have a stone either. If you go to Laurel Hill, you know exactly where I'm standing. Way in the south, over by Ridge Avenue, looking across to the north, to the central and north section there. Arthur Burdett Frost, one of my favorites, a discovery I made a few years ago. He was an artist. He was friends with a lot of artists, including Eakins. He did study with Eakins. He was best man of, not Winslow Homer. I'm blanking. But he was best man of another artist. It'll come to me. Wedding. His father was teacher at Central High. He was a teacher of literature, belles letters. He started drawing and etching, and eventually worked his way to oils and to watercolors. I love the fact that he built a house with his studio, and the name of the house is Money Sunk. Both of his sons did become painters. He is best remembered, well, he's remembered for a lot of things. He was one of the originators of cartoon strips, and he studied facial expressions so beautifully. I just pulled 4 frames out of this. This is a student showing his teacher the painting that he's working on, and the teacher takes the palette and the brush from the student and decides to make a few little changes here. And you can see, look at the expression on the face. It's just classic cartoon stuff. My favorite, despite the topic, I really do love cats. But this is a 16-panel cartoon called Our Cat Eats Rat Poison. And you can see he's holding his stomach here. It hits, goes straight in the air. Look at the woman falling backward, the motion. This is what A.B. Frost specialized in, is motion. He could show motion so easily. I'm sorry about the stereotype here, but again, there's the cat. I love that. Look at the expression on that woman's face. The cat chasing people down the stairs. Finally throws himself off the dock. But this is like an 1880 comic strip. And comic strips really didn't come into being until a few years later. He was one of the originators of comic strips in the United States. Lewis Carroll saw his work and sent him some sketches and said, "Can you use these sketches for my book of poems and puzzles, Phantasmagoria?" So he agreed to take the job, and he did many illustrations for Lewis Carroll, but they fell out of favor when Carroll started asking him if he knew any people with young pre-adolescent girls that might allow Frost to take their picture, their nude picture, so that Carroll could study it for his collection. I mean, I'm sure you knew that Lewis Carroll loved pictures of prepubescent girls. He was a photographer, and that was what he specialized in. And this sort of freaked Frost out a little bit. He was not going to go around to his friends and ask if they could take pictures of their naked little girls. Um, so he broke up with Dodson, with Lewis, but he took up with Joel Chandler Harris, just as Joel Chandler Harris was starting to put out the Uncle Remus stories. And he did some of the best illustrations for Uncle Remus you will ever see. Brer Fox and Brer Rabbit. And you can see more than 100 illustrations by A.B. Frost. This is, I don't know if he did these to relax or to make extra money or what, but he was commissioned by a lot of sporting goods companies to do an annual calendar for them. And sometimes he would, I'm sure you've seen a calendar where there's one picture on top and then you could tear off the 12 months. There's other where there are 12 pictures, obviously, two different types of calendars. These calendars now go for 5 figures each. I'm sorry, the paintings. The paintings now go for 5 figures each, not the calendars. Frost is buried under a marble marker, which means it is melting. His son, Jack Frost, that was really his name. Jack Frost was also a well-known painter, and Jack's material actually sells for more than AB's now. Jack was a landscape painter out west. He's buried, let's just say it's in front of this stone, but he's buried in the family plot also. Here's a little bit of a mystery. This is George F. Barker. He was painted in 1886. He was 51 years old. Now, he was a professor of physics at the University of Pennsylvania. He was president of the American Academy for the Advancement of Science. He was a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and he was a professor at Yale Med. He was the first person in the United States to demonstrate radium. He is interred at Laurel Hill West, section it's up. It was on the first slide. I didn't put it down there. Bryn Mawr section. There we go. Bryn Mawr section. I expected to see that he would die of cancer or something related to radiation. I could find nothing about his career. I could find nothing about exactly what he was doing. But his death certificate said he died of cerebral arterial disease. So he died of a stroke. He was in his 70s, and there was no mention of cancer. So he escaped the issues that a lot of early people dealing with radiation got into. His painting is in a southern Illinois town of 15,000 people. It's called the Cedarhurst Collection. Mount Vernon is not a big city in southern Illinois. It's really not. I was born in Springfield, Illinois, and I had relatives down in that area, Vandalia, St. Elmo, Mount Vernon. And they've got this really nice art gallery there. I think this is Barker back here. I couldn't get a better close-up of this gallery that's in Mount Vernon, Illinois. This one you know. This one you know. This is David Hayes Agnew, the Agnew Clinic, painted in 1889 when Agnew himself was 71 years old. And remember to tell the difference. Agnew was Penn, Gross was Jeff. Gross is buried at Woodlands. Samuel Gross is not buried at Laurel Hill. But David Hayes Agnew is buried at Laurel Hill West. He is in the Ashland section. And this painting currently is co-owned by UPenn Medical School, PMA, and PAFA. It's based on this photo, which I find absolutely fascinating. You know, there is Dr. Agnew there. Some interesting people here. There's one guy who looks like he's going to sleep. Yeah, this guy looks kind of casual back here with his legs up. This guy moved just as they took the picture. But everybody in the painting was a member of the class of 91 or 92 at the University of Penn. And they contacted Agnew to paint a portrait of, they contacted Eakins to paint a portrait of Agnew, who was retiring in 1891. And Eakins said, I'll take the challenge and I won't charge you anything more, but I want to get as many members of the class in there as I can and make this a working picture. He's trying to make up for what happened with his Samuel Gross painting, which people absolutely detested. It was bloody, it was messy, it was just awful. And here you don't see a speck of blood. I mean, even at the operative site, you don't see a speck of blood. So, how many people at Laurel Hill are buried at Laurel Hill in this picture? There you go. We got 6 of them. Agnew, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I did a podcast on Agnew last year, I think. Fascinating character. If you, the podcast is, it's actually on James Garfield. But when Garfield was shot, Agnew was summoned from Philadelphia to go to Washington and tend the president. He did so with actually washing his hands, unlike the other doctors. And then he didn't charge anything. This is where Agnew's buried, a very modest mausoleum in the Ashland section at Laurel Hill West. Now we got Elwood Kirby. Elwood Kirby was a redheaded, here he is passing gas. He's the anesthetist for this patient who's having a mastectomy. The redheaded anesthetist. Kirby was controversial and he liked it. For instance, when Harry K. Thaw shot Stanford White in a jealous rage, Kirby became Harry K. Thaw's doctor, even though Thaw was a New Yorker, Kirby was a Philadelphian. Maybe Thaw couldn't get a New York doctor, I don't know. But yeah, he ended up being a doctor for Harry K. Thaw. He had a huge gun collection. He was always traveling. He was always good for a quote. If the newspapers wanted a good quote, well, why don't we let's see what Dr. Kirby has to say. And he died in 1935 at age 70. And he was buried in the family mausoleum right here. And the next year, grave robbers came along, broke open this mausoleum, dragged out Dr. Kirby's body, stripped him of most of its clothing and whatever jewelry he was wearing, and then they just left it on the ground outside the mausoleum. Now, I don't know if this is true, but now when you go past this mausoleum, if you look at the step here, there are scrape marks. And I've heard some guides say that those are the scrape marks that were made when they dragged the coffin out. It's possible. It's possible, but I don't have any proof of that. So anyway, that's Elwood Kirby. Then we've got Harry Tolman. He went to Lehigh before he went to Penn. His uncle was George Priestley. He got a very lucrative job when he graduated. He became a life insurance physician doing physical exams for life insurance company. And he made a very good living at that. He was a big time golfer. He was a big time club man, but he didn't make the newspaper very much. He has a small stone in the Everglades section at Laurel Hill West. Joseph Price Tunis was 23 when this painting was made. He graduated, he was an 1889 graduate. He served in the Spanish-American War. He had a couple of society daughters. I don't know what else to call them. Annis Lee Tunis and Lydia Wister Tunis. You know, And but he didn't get in the newspapers himself very much. His daughters were in the newspapers a lot more than he was. He died in 1936. He's buried at Laurel Hill East in the South section. And a couple of years later, that one daughter I mentioned, Annis Lee Tunis, committed suicide by jumping out of a hotel window at Rittenhouse Square. She had become a professional photographer. Tucked over in the corner, appropriately, is Frederick Hugh Milliken. And I say that he's tucked over in the corner appropriately, it's because I find nothing about him. I found a death certificate that he's a physician and that he died of cerebral hemorrhage, and I found his stone. But other than that, I got nothing. I don't even know what type of medicine this guy practiced, if he ever did practice. And then finally, we got William Henry Furness III, the guy in the back row with the cocked head. I have a feeling he was a real character. Now, I'll explain why. He was a nephew of Fairman Rogers, and the daughter of Kate Furness Rogers. Kate Furness Rogers. Well, that's not right. Anyway, nephew of Fairman Rogers. He became an ethnographer and an author. In addition to practicing medicine, he made multiple trips to the South Pacific. He was among the first to study and photograph the Kayan people of Borneo and the Wab people on Yap, where they used those big stone coins. His grandfather was the famous abolitionist, Unitarian minister, William Henry Furness, who in this painting is by Cecilia Bow. Now, he's practicing medicine. This is Edwardian Philadelphia, late 1890s, getting out of Victorian into Edwardian, which means he's always wearing a high collar. He's always got long sleeves on. And that's because he was one of the most heavily tattooed men in the Western Hemisphere. There's just this one photo of him that I could find. But I'll bet you that his patients never even realized he had any of these tattoos because of the dress of the day. He is the only one in the plot at T7 at Laurel Hill East that has his full name on the stone. Everybody else there just has their initials. Nobody else has the full name on the stone. Okay, one last look. There they are. Moving on, Joshua B. Lippincott. Lippincott was a publisher, a magazine publisher. He started Lippincott Publishing when he was 23 years old. And in 1878, Lippincott published the first U.S. textbook in nursing. Now, whenever I give a tour at Laurel Hill East, inevitably we'll go past a Lippincott and somebody will say, "Oh, is that the publisher?" And I tell them, "No, we do have him here, but we also have 153 people named Lippincott at the two cemeteries, including the Dundas Lippincotts." Ooh, that's a haunted house story. That comes at a later time. I haven't even done a podcast about that one yet. So Joshua Lippincott was a very successful publisher. He's buried in the south section of Laurel Hill East with his obelisk, his name on it, and his magazine outlived him by several years. He died in 1886. Lippincott's monthly lasted into the 20th century. The next episode of All Bones Considered that I'm doing for May is about 4 magazine publishers: Graham's Magazine, Peterson's Magazine, Lippincott's Magazine, and then the guy who published Philadelphia Magazine is buried at Laurel Hill West. So I'll talk about him also. That should be out on or about May 1st. James McAllister, he was painted when he was 55 years old. Scottish immigrant. He was a teacher, pedagogue. He was an author. He rose to be the superintendent of Philadelphia Public Schools. He was the first president of Drexel University. There's Anthony Drexel there. There's George W. Childs, who was in Laurel Hill East. And there's McAllister in the same picture. He died at sea while he was sailing to Bermuda, and he is in the Bryn Mawr section at Laurel Hill West. Joseph Lapsley Wilson was painted when he was 51 years old in uniform. This is a personal capture. This painting is behind glass on the second floor, third floor of the First City Troop building on 23rd Street. And I love the way they give directions to get to the First City Troop building. Yeah, well, you get off the Vine Street Expressway at 23rd Street, you take a right, it's the first castle on the right. And it is, it's the first castle on the right. And if you're really nice, to leave it open the doors and let you park inside the castle. But on a tour that was arranged through Laurel Hill a couple of years ago now, I got a capture of this painting and it intrigued me some because I couldn't find this online someplace. Well, it's all over now because I made a copy and it's been spread around a little bit. He was a director of a commercial bank in Philadelphia, member of the Union League, National Republican League, member of the First City Troop. He was a huge believer in civil rights for Native Americans, and he vigorously opposed American imperialism in all of its forms. Now, late in the 1870s, he bought land in Marion, Pennsylvania, just about, I'm going to say about a mile from where I am right now. I'm in Bala Cynwyd. It was just over the Philadelphia city line, and he built a mansion there. He called it Red Slates, and then he named the street leading into it for his mother. Her mother's maiden name was Lapsley, his middle name. So Lapsley Lane led right into his property, and he became a very well-informed botanist and horticulturalist, and he made these grounds absolutely gorgeous. In 1901, he married Carolyn Alice Yates, and in 1922, this property across City Avenue in Marion was sold to this guy. It's Albert Barnes, Dr. Albert Barnes. He and his wife, Wilson and his wife moved to a smaller house on the property and continued to care for the Arboretum. And the only way they would sell this property to Barnes was the condition that the Arboretum be saved and that he be the first director of the Arboretum. So Barnes demolished Red Slates and built his own mansion to suit his art gallery, which he placed in there, but he kept his promise. He preserved the Arboretum. This recently passed into the hands of St. Joseph University. They still maintain the Arboretum. They maintain the building that was the Barnes Foundation, but they've got their own work, their own artwork in there right now. Get a chance to visit this Arboretum. It's one of the less visited ones. It's not convenient by public transportation. There's like one bus you can use to get there. There's 65, and that's about it. Lapsley is I keep calling him Lapsley because of the Lapsley Lane. Wilson is buried in those simple markers in Laurel Hill East. He died of chronic myocarditis. This is Rudolf Hennig, but you would not have known that when you saw the painting because the painting is called The Cello Player. It's now in a private collection. It used to belong to PAFA, and don't worry, it went for a good cause. I'll explain. Hennig was born in Bavaria, and he trained at Leipzig Conservatory. He was a cellist at the Walnut Street Theater following the Civil War, and he helped found the Philadelphia Musical Academy in 1869. From 1872 to 1879, he was principal cello player in the Theodore Thomas Orchestra. And when Fritz Steele put together the first Philadelphia orchestra, that's Fritz. Fritz is buried at Laurel Hill West also. His choice for first cello was Rudolf Hennig. Hennig was very popular. He actually has a plaque at the Academy of Music. I haven't found it. It might be up in some of the private offices someplace, but there is a plaque there with his name on it. When he died, you'll notice what they used for his obituary, the Eakins painting. Now, I mentioned the Gross Clinic before, and this is what I mean. There's blood there. There's blood there. This was painted about 18 years before he painted the Agnew Clinic. Gross was at Jefferson, as opposed to Agnew was at Penn. I mean, look at this, the woman down there in the pit of this theater. But anyway, the Gross Clinic sat in the alumni building at Jefferson for years and years. And Jefferson finally got to the point where they said, you know, we're not art curators, we're not an art museum. We don't really need this. So they put it on the market. And that horrified people all over Philadelphia. And quickly, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, PAFA got together. PAFA sold this painting so it could pay for its portion of the Gross Clinic. And now when you go to the art museum on top of the hill, there's one room where you can see the Gross Clinic across from the Agnew Clinic and do direct comparisons of these two marvelous paintings. They're totally different in the way they feel. Modest stone for Mr. Henning in Laurel Hill West. Harrison Morris was, I mean, he looks like an ascetic type of person, and I think he probably was. He was a writer, an editor, and an arts administrator from 1893 to 1905. He was managing director of PAFA. Here's a good shot of PAFA before Cherry Street was occupied by a lot of other stuff here. He married this man's daughter. This is Joseph Wharton. Wharton was the co-founder of Bethlehem Steel, as well as Swarthmore College, and of course, the Wharton School of Business. He's the one who donated the money for the Wharton School of Business. He was editor of Lippincott's magazine. He was also the art editor of the Ladies' Home Journal, which was being published by Louisa Knapp Curtis, Cyrus Curtis. Cyrus is buried at Laurel Hill West. Louisa is buried at Laurel Hill East. They're not painted by Eakins. He wrote a lot. He wrote poetry, he wrote fiction, he wrote essays. He owned a 110-acre farm on Rice's Mill Road in Wyncote. It's called the Ends Meet Farm. It's almost as good as Money Sunk, but ends meet is not too bad. When he died in 1948, his wife Anna sold it to Cheltenham Township School District. In 1956, she got about $250,000 for it, and the ground was broken for a brand new high school. So, Cheltenham High School opened in 1957. I'm sorry, the cornerstone was laid in 1959, but this is on the property that used to belong to Harrison Morris, Cheltenham High School. I don't know if Rick Martin managed to get onto this, but a good friend of mine, Rick, is graduated from Cheltenham High School, the same class as Benjamin Netanyahu, and a year behind Reggie Jackson. All three of them, very different people, graduated from Cheltenham High School. Died. He did get a notice in the newspaper. Talks about his various U.S. Commissioner General to the Roman Art Exposition, very much involved in art, and a very nice little inscription on his stone: "Return to God who gave him life." That's a nice one. This is Charles Lester Leonard. This painting is in the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. Charles Leonard was the first radiologist at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. He also founded the Philadelphia Röntgen Ray Society, and he served as president of the American Röntgen Ray Society 1904-1905. He was one of the foremost experts in urological X-ray diagnosis. He was the first American physician to demonstrate kidney stones with X-rays. The American Röntgen Society established the Charles Lester Leonard Prize to recognize outstanding contributions to X-ray technology. I don't know how long it lasted. I found very little about it, and I don't think it is still offered. But an award of $1,000 for the most valuable surface in the service in the last year for the field of X-ray development. He is also buried in an unmarked grave. Very frustrating to go around all these places, find out people don't even have gravestones. Now we get into some of the women, and now you're going to see a lot of women in a row. This is Jenny Dean Kershaw Murray. She was a co-student with sculptor Samuel Murray. Samuel Murray was in Eakins' class with her. Eventually, they did marry. That is, Jenny and Murray married, because Samuel Murray was Eakins' lover for several years. They lived together, they worked together. Remember what I said? Eakins took pictures of a lot more naked men than he did women. This is Samuel, the sculptor. This is a sculpture that Samuel did. When Eakins did the Agnew Clinic, the painting was too big to put on an easel. So he had to squat on the floor like this to paint all the stuff in the lower part. And Murray did this sculpture of Eakins cross-legged on the floor working on the Agnew Clinic. That's kind of cool. Murray also did this statue of Joseph Leidy that's outside the Academy of Natural Sciences. But this is who he married when they were both 50 years old. They never had children. There are no examples of her work that I could find either online or in the PAFA catalog or the PMA catalog. Lots on Samuel, but Samuel's not buried at Laurel Hill. He chose to be buried at Cathedral Cemetery, whereas Jane, as was her full name, was buried in the Pinpoint section at Laurel Hill West. Now, this is one I've taken a particular liking to. This is Henry Walter Schlichter, whom everybody calls Slick Schlichter. Slick was a sickly child, but he bulked up when he joined the Schuylkill Navy. And in 1889, he started winning cross-country races. In 1890, he was a runner-up in the bantamweight class as a boxer. He was known universally as Slick. He was a writer for the Philadelphia Item, both boxing and baseball. Here's some other, bantamweights. Slick got together with a Negro League player named Saul White. I think that's Saul there. This isn't labeled, but that looks like Saul right there. He was the white face for the organization because Saul was really the guy. Saul, by the way, comes from King Solomon. His name was King Solomon Jones, or King Solomon White. I'm sorry, King Solomon White. So he just went by Saul White. Schlichter served as the face of this Negro League organization. And this was before there were organized Negro Leagues. In fact, Schlichter was actually helped organize the first Negro League with Saul. They were both very involved of it. Here we go again. Again, you can find him. He's the short white guy right there. And again, there's Saul White right next to him. But I want to point out, if you're a fan of baseball and you know your baseball history, look who's down here in the corner. Rube Foster. Rube Foster played on this team. And here are the Philadelphia Giants again. I mean, this is such an anachronism. All of these young, black, strapping, athletic guys, and this white guy, little white guy with a straw hat sitting in the middle of them. He had, believe it or not, Saul White and Harry Smith managed 5 future Hall of Fame players, including Rube Foster and Pop Lloyd. He died in 1944 after a fall. And you guessed it, Schlichter has an unmarked grave under a beautiful tree. I should have taken it from a different angle because that's how I'm going to remember. He's on the sports tour that I give in a couple of months. Or is it next month? Next month. Next month, I give a sports tour at Laurel Hill East. I'm adding Slick to it. This is Slick's wife. This is Mary McAllister Schlichter. painted in 1898. She died in 1913. And for the life of me, I cannot find where she is buried. There was no obituary. I can't find um, a death notice at ancestry.com. His second wife is buried with him in that unmarked grave. I don't know whether Maybelle was Mary McAllister's nickname. Um, I don't know where she ended up being buried. The painting is in the Fry Art Museum in Seattle. No, like I said, all of a sudden, a lot of women. Here is Sarah Satorm Frischmuth. Was she related to Harriet Frischmuth? I don't know. I assume so, but there were a lot of Frischmuths in town at that time. She was 58 years old when this was painted in 1900. This is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. What can you tell about that painting? Those are the rare musical instruments that this woman collected. Her husband, W.D.J. Frischmuth, was a tobacco magnate, and they had lots of money. I'm going to blow up and lighten this section down at the bottom here so you can see what Eakins has painted. All of these wonderful, there's a hurdy-gurdy. Oh, these are some of the things that are in her collection. Japanese temple drum, the English hurdy-gurdy, but I could find no painting of her anyplace and no marker. She's buried at Laurel Hill East in the K section, and I couldn't find a marker for her. I didn't get over to take a picture of the grass, I'm afraid. This is Clara Mather. She's one of the more interesting looking people, I think, that Eakins painted. I couldn't find much about her, but there are a series of pictures that Eakins took and used to paint her. The eyes in that are haunting in that photo. She was a housewife. I think she was just a model. I don't think she was a student. I find no record of her at PAFA. I don't know what her relationship was to Eakins. Um, she did not get an obituary, but that's really an interesting painting. I really like that. And she is buried. Oh, there's her death certificate. She at least got a marker. Let's see, she's buried in section 9 in Laurel Hill East in the south section. And then there's Elizabeth Duane Gillespie, who's also at Laurel Hill East. This is a posthumous painting. This was commissioned by some of the organizations that Elizabeth worked with. And believe me, Elizabeth worked with a lot of organizations. For one thing, she was Ben Franklin's great granddaughter. She married U.S. Marine Archibald Hamilton Gillespie. That's not him. And they had a daughter together. And then he just disappeared. She never bothered to get divorced from him, but she kept his last name. And I'm not sure how much time they even spent together. Now, when they were married, they lived in Washington, D.C. for a brief period before the war. And Elizabeth got to be really good friends with Verena Davis, who's Jefferson Davis's wife. They got to be really close friends. And on the day that South Carolina seceded from the Union, Elizabeth was sitting in the gallery of Congress and she was shouting, "Traitor, traitor," down to the congressman on the floor. Elizabeth was responsible for putting together the Great Sanitary Fair of 1864. This is Logan Square in Philadelphia. There's the cathedral right there. She set this thing up in a couple of months' time, several 100,000 visitors for a relatively short sanitary fair that was very successful. And the men realized that she did this much better than they could have. So they got her involved with organizing the centennial of 1876. And she helped raise money. They raised so much money for this that when Memorial Hall was built, There was supposed to be one wing set aside for the women's exhibit, but the advertising had attracted a lot of people, and more foreign countries came in and said, no, we want space too. We want space too. So they were given the space in Memorial Hall, and they essentially told Elizabeth, this is after she spent a couple of years raising money and handing it over. About a year before the fair was to open, they said, well, sorry, we don't have room for you in Monument Hall or Memorial Hall. So you know what she did? She went out and she raised more money and she built the women's pavilion. This was not in the original plan. This was a very convincing woman who could raise money for important causes. Absolutely fantastic. She was a member of, she was president of the Colonial Dames of America, and she fought to have Flag Day June 14th. She died in 1900, and Flag Day was not made an official holiday until many years later. But Elizabeth Duane Gillespie is the woman who encouraged Flag Day. That means at Laurel Hill East, we've got Sarah Josepha Hale, who essentially invented Thanksgiving, didn't invent, but made Thanksgiving a holiday. Elizabeth Gillespie, who made June or Flag Day an important day. And over at West, we've got Anna Mae Jarvis, who made Mother's Day a holiday, and Martha Kimball, who made Decoration Day a holiday. So we got 4 women, all women, who made these holidays happen. This is a photo taken shortly before she died. I think this is probably the one that Eakins used when he did his posthumous painting of her. She is in the Duane. In fact, just happened to be looking at this earlier. Yeah, this is the Duane. Hold that up. Here we go. That's the Duane family plot. There are 16 plots all behind this fence. And Elizabeth is tucked way back in the upper right-hand corner. She has no marker. And this was an amazing woman. She deserves more than just a marker for her grave, that's for sure. Adam Swope Bear, painted in 1903 when he was 64 years old. He was born in Lancaster. His father, Elias, his mother, Mary, and his spouse was Eliza, and I can find no information about any of them. I mean, I can prove that he lived. I can show in the census that there is an Adam Swope Bear in the 1870 census. When he registered for the draft, okay, I'm sorry, this is draft registration. Draft is 1863. He's a clerk. He lives at 1023 Coat Street. This is the 1870 census. And once again, there's Adam, and he is listed as a clerk. I can find a copy of his last will, but I can't find a picture of him or any newspaper articles about him. There's his death certificate. And he has a very simple stone. We're getting there. It's 7:30. I've got a few more. This is scheduled for 90 minutes. I haven't even checked to see. Beth, have you been checking to see if there are no questions, no chat? Okay.
Nothing
We'll
yet.
move on then. Okay, we'll go to Beatrice Fenton here. This is a painting made in 1904 when Beatrice Fenton was 17 years old and nobody had ever heard of her. Yet Beatrice Fenton was probably second only to Harriet Frischmuth as far as female sculptors of this period. When she was 12 years old, she was more of a horsewoman. She got a nice article written about her in the Inquirer. And she is dressed for horsing with Miss Beatrice Fenton. She did sculpture. She did medallions. She stayed very busy and she was very good at what she did. Her sculptors were children at play. If you recognize this, you should. This is in Rittenhouse Square. This is the Evelyn Taylor Price Memorial Sundial. And this is by Beatrice Fenton. The woman you see, well, she's a girl in this picture. She's 17 in this picture. This one, I would swear, if somebody handed me this picture, I would say, well, that's a Harriet Frischmuth. It's not. It's Beatrice Fenton. This is called a seaweed fountain, and this is in a public garden in South Carolina right now. Then there's the Nereid fountain. I mean, if you know Harriet Frischmuth's work, tell me that doesn't look like a Harriet. Oh, I lost my pointer. Okay, if that doesn't look like Dacia del Tail, the Slovenian model that Harriet Frischmuth used, I don't know what does. That's pretty amazing. All right, well, there you not. I don't want to go forward. Wait a minute. All right, what I don't want to mean to go to the end. Let's go back. Where were we? 192. There we go. This woman with the amazing eyes is Marjorie Martinet. And Beatrice and Marjorie met in school and immediately linked with each other. They became lifelong partners. They wrote a series of love letters to each other, many of which have been preserved. But and as a couple, they donated much of what they were doing to PAFA. They were known as a couple in PAFA. It was no secret. But guess what? Guess who has an unmarked grave? You know, Beatrice Fenton. There is a footplate. I did find a footplate over here that tells you this is the Fenton plot. But as far as Beatrice and her father, who was also painted by Eakins, there's no mention of them. I just love that statue. But there's proof that it's not Harriet Frischmuth. It's Beatrice standing next to the statue. That's not Harriet Frischmuth standing next to the statue. This is William Robert Hallowell, William Robinson Hallowell. He was 72 when he was painted. He was a member of the 15th Cavalry, also known as the Anderson Cavalry. And other than that, I got nothing. I couldn't find anything else on this guy. I don't know what he did for a living. Occupation on his burial card from the military has nothing on it. Couldn't find an obituary. I got a death certificate, but it was widower, and I think it just says, yeah, occupation, retired. Thank you. That doesn't help. He died of exhaustion. He has a fairly nice stone also. This distinguished looking gentleman had the privilege of being painted by Thomas Eakins twice. This is General George W. I'm sorry, Admiral. What's wrong with me? Admiral George W. Melville. He was painted when he was 63 years old. During the Civil War, he was captain of the USS Wachusett. He worked his way through the ranks. He was with the USS Jeannette expedition of 1879 to 81. When they attempted to reach the North Pole through the Bering Strait, they approached through the Pacific to get to the North Pole. And of course, they got jammed for 2 years. And then the boat got crushed and it sank. And Melville was he was able to lead 13 people back over more than 1,000 miles. They started out with a crew of 37s. But this was such a big deal. I mean, it sounds a little bit like Elijah Kent Kane, the same sort of thing that Melville did. I need to do a podcast on him eventually. This is a special medal that was struck by the government, by Congress, a congressional medal for the people who survived the loss of the Jeannette. He wrote about his adventures. The Jeannette has a special monument at not Arlington. What's wrong with you, Joe? Annapolis. There's a special monument at Annapolis. Very distinguished looking gentleman, no doubt about that. Here he was the chief of the Bureau of Steam Engineering, and he was made Commodore. He was superintendent of 120 ships, and he's the man who led engineering into a profession rather than an artisanal, rather than a craftsman. Engineers became professionals in the Navy under George Melville. 1899, he was made a rear admiral. Here's his statue in the Naval Yard down in South Philadelphia, sculpted by our old friend Sam Murray, whose wife we met and who was Eakins' lover. When he died in 1907, he had made no arrangements for his burial. Rather than being at Arlington or maybe Annapolis, he'd probably be in one of those places. He chose to be buried, or somebody had chose to bury him in his wife's family mausoleum at Laurel Hill South. And way down at the bottom here, you'll see his name. So this man who has a monument in Annapolis and a statue at the Navy Yard and has his name on a bolted door in a mausoleum in South Laurel Hill East. Edward Taylor Snow. His father was Edward Knight Snow. His mother was Mary A. Taylor. His wife was Bella Osborne. He studied at PAFA. That's his signature on one of the pieces. He studied in Paris, Amsterdam, and Berlin. He was a landscape painter. And if I go through the catalogs at PAFA or PMA, nothing. Nothing. I grabbed these off of the web, but neither of them is in a Philadelphia museum. I could not find a picture of him. That's why this is blank. But a nice monument in Norriton at Laurel Hill West. We're almost there. I got two more. Excuse me, three more. This is Thomas Fenton. This is Beatrice Fenton's father. He was a physician. This painting is at the Delaware Art Museum in Wilmington. As a physician, he was, well, this is his marriage notice. That was one thing I found on him that I thought was interesting. He was the head of the Stetson Hospital. John B. Stetson, of course, is buried at Laurel Hill West. Stetson was one of the good bosses, did everything he could for his employees to stay with him as long as they could, which means he built he built a community, then he built a library and a hospital, and various other places for his employees to use. And Thomas Fenton was in charge of that hospital. There's Beatrice. He was president of the Arts Club. He was president of the Philadelphia County Medical Society. And since he and Beatrice are in the same grave, that means there's no marker for him either. And this, we know Matthew Mescart was painted by Eakins. We don't know where the painting is. I looked all over. Rachel has searched this also because Rachel is curious about this. Rachel is the historian at Laurel Hill West. Now, the odd thing is I can't find his painting. However, this is his grandfather. His grandfather was painted by Daniel Dickinson. This is Matthew Huizinga Mescart, and this can be found at PMA. This is his father, who was painted in 1839 by Manuel Joaquin de Franca. This is also at PMA. But we can't find the painting for Matthew himself. This is his mausoleum, moderate mausoleum. It's not far from the conservatory. It's got, I didn't put the close-up, it's got some of the dullest stained glass I've ever seen in my life on the inside of it. And finally, this is the last one now. This is William Thompson. William Thompson was 74 when he was painted. This is a painting that greets you when you walk into the Motor Museum or when you walk into the Philadelphia the Medical Historical Society. William Graham Thompson, Jefferson class of 55. That's what Jefferson looked like in 1855. No, that's not a subway entrance. That's a place to park the ambulances, the horse-drawn ambulances. He took up ophthalmology and was quite good at it. He was also one of the pioneers in antisepsis. He was one of the first to start using carbolic acid before doing surgery to kill any ambient germs that might be around. He also practiced at a field hospital during the Civil War, and he took the care to the patient. What he developed was something almost like a MASH unit, the Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Most of the patients still got transported back on Letterman's ambulances, but some he treated at the scene. He was also a pioneer in photomicrography. He was the first person at Penn to do photomicrographs. His brother Frank was president of Pennsylvania Railroad, also buried at Laurel Hill West, but not painted by Thomas Eakins. Now, as a favor to his brother, I find this interesting. There were a lot of accidents occurring on the railroads because people were not able to identify colors of lights, various colors of things. So Thompson invented this colorblind, it's called a stick, the Thompson stick, and it has 40 different colors of thread. And you're supposed to match the threads that look most alike. Now, this has obviously been taken over by the little circle with the dots in it that are different colors, and you can see if can you see that number 36 in there? But he was actually the first person to develop something to test for color blindness. And since we had the eclipse yesterday, I thought I would add this. Okay. Thompson lived at 1426 Walnut Street. It puts him right there in Rittenhouse, doesn't it? Here is his death certificate. A physician. He died of arteriosclerosis, uremia, and he's got a nice ledger stone. Okay, that's it. All right. Should you want to listen to some of the podcasts, scan the QR code. I'll leave that up there. Should you want to get in touch with me, I've discovered that my really good email address, joe@joelex.net, is dead. It's probably been dead about 2 or 3 weeks now. So we're going to use the more complicated one, the jrlexjr1947 @gmail. If you want my website, where I've got podcasts, I've also got a radio show, a weekly radio show that I do for a local radio station. And should the urge reach you, that's my phone number. So I'll leave that up. QA, the Fairman Rogers Four-in-Hand painted as a small bridge with still exists. That is a good question. I don't have an answer. I don't know which part of Fairmount Park that was painted in. And the funny thing is, there are, if you look, there's a Wikipedia page called Paintings by Thomas Eakins, and you can see some of the preliminary drawings that he did for this. There are at least a half a dozen different sketches and early paintings. And I'll bet you would be able to identify the location by looking at that. But I never even thought of doing that. Let's see. Let's go back to that. That would be slide 32. I got to take you out, but slide 32. Okay, why are you not doing this? We'll do it this way then. Too generic. I can't tell from just looking at that. Maybe if I looked at the studies, the sketches, I'd be able to tell more. Interesting question, though. Thank you. Oh, another question. Good.
Yep.
Did Eakins do portraits? Yes, he did. He preferred doing portraits of people that he knew, fellow students, fellow artists, people who looked interesting to him, like that one woman with the big eyes, who I found so fascinating. I'm sure that Eakins felt the same way about her. Yeah, not Jenny Murray. Where is she? Yeah, Clara Mather. Clara Mather. I think sometimes he just liked the idea of Somebody looking interested. Well, okay, that's not working now. That, he just thought somebody was interesting, and he'd go up and say, "May I paint you?" I mean, the fact that he painted Beatrice Fenton when she was 17, and 10 years later she was a famous sculptor, that's a happy accident. I'm not going to chase it now. There's not that one. Is that one? No, that's Murray's wife.
So Joe, I think the question was, did he do it to supplement his income? Do paintings to supplement his income?
No, I mean it's like the Agnew. Did I tell you how much he got paid for doing that massive painting, the Agnew thing? He
No.
got $700. He got $700.
And
That's
then
equivalent to what's that?
I was gonna say Tom has a follow-up.
Okay, hold on.
What was your source that he was independently
$750.
wealthy?
That's equivalent to 23,000 today. And I missed what you said. I talked over you.
Tom Keels has a question in the Q&A.
Hey, Tom. You know something, Tom? Asking independent. I didn't research Eakins that much. I just assumed he was independently wealthy because he didn't go out and earn money that much, except when he needed to, you know, to make some money by doing a portrait. But he didn't. I mean, he was not like John Singer Sargent or Mary Cassatt or Cecilia Beau. He did not specialize in doing portraits. There are more than 500 paintings that he did. And since I'm doing a podcast about people who were buried at a cemetery, I've got to show you pictures of the people. But he did plenty of other things also. And I would have to investigate that, Tom. I don't have an answer for you because I know that you've investigated this. You did some sort of combination tour with Woodlands. And again, no, I have not read that much Eakins. I do not have a biography that I would recommend. I wanted to limit, I didn't want to get too deeply talking about Eakins because I knew this was a lot of information that I had to put out there in less than an hour and a half.
And you had mentioned in the beginning that you weren't going to focus on Eakins' information about him as a person because he's not buried at our
Yeah.
cemetery. He's buried at the
Now,
Woodlands.
if on the other hand, we can get together with Woodlands and we can do a combined Zoom presentation of Laurel Hill and Woodlands people, that would be fun. Let
Yeah.
them take an hour and a half, and then we take an hour and a half of Zoom.
3-hour Zoom, that's a lot.
It's a lot of Zoom, a lot of Zoom. But if you put it on, nobody knows whether you're watching or not on Zoom.
True. So Maria, no, we do not have a specific
Yeah,
recommendation for an Eakins biography.
I do not because I did not read any biographies. Eakins, I pretty much stuck to what I found online. Some of the others I went to other sources, but Eakins was pretty much online stuff.
Does anybody have any other questions? You can put them in the Q&A.
And there's still 12 people hanging around. All right.
Well, you and I are two of them. We have to be here.
That's true. There we go. LDD. Put this way, Joe. Let's put that up there in case anybody wants to grab that one last time.
Yeah, if you'd like to discuss anything with Joe privately off of the webinar, that's his contact information. Yeah. Question, were only wealthy people buried at Laurel Hill East? Do you want to take it or do you want me? I can take it.
Go for it.
So our prices for graves, for lots at Laurel Hill East were very expensive. So yes, it was cost prohibitive to be buried at Laurel Hill East. You would pay by the square footage And, you know, that price started in the 1830s at 25 cents or 70 cents per square foot, depending on where you were buried. And I could only imagine that that price would have went up as the years progressed and as more people showed interest. So
And under, if
could
I can
afford it.
interject, a skilled workman, such as a bricklayer, might get $1.25 a day, might earn $6.50, $7 a week. Factory workers made less than $1 a day in the 1830s when the cemetery opened. And
So very, very cost prohibitive. And we certainly do have a lot of wealthy people buried here. Good
just
question.
curious, is everybody is everybody on the call right now from Philadelphia, or do I have any folks from outside Philadelphia? If you're from outside Philadelphia, I'd be curious to know.
You can put that in the Q&A if you're from outside of Philly.
Yeah. All right. Beth, this one took a lot of time. I'm volunteering to do it again in a year or two.
We get use out of it since you already put it together.
Yeah.
Pennington, New Jersey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Holly. Thank you. Okay.
Last questions. One. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, for the person who asked about an Eakins bio, we have a recommendation of the 2002 volume that the Philadelphia Museum of Art and Yale put out to mark the Philadelphia Museum of Art exhibit, Thomas Eakins, organized by Darrell Sewell. That's Sewell. Let me see if they could put that in the chat. Let me copy and paste. Copy. Paste. Let me send that to everyone. There you go. I put in the webinar chat the information for that biography. It includes biographical information and illustrations for almost all of his paintings. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. Well, before we cut everybody loose, let me promote May 11th. I'm doing an accessible hotspots tour at Laurel Hill East. What that means is we don't leave the paved path and we limit it to 90 minutes. It's still a good tour. It's just
Absolutely.
for people who, wheelchair or on a scooter. May 13th is a long tour at Laurel Hill West. Most of the time, Laurel Hill West are 90-minute tours. This one is 120 minutes because we do a big loop. It's called This Sporting Life. And we have a lot of important sports people at Laurel Hill West, including members of the Hall of Fame for baseball, golf, tennis, skiing, and hockey, members of the Hall of Fame. And we will visit all of them when we do that tour on May 13th.
It's the
And
18th. It's Saturday, May 18th.
18th. I've got the wrong night. Okay, I've got the wrong date down on mine. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will change that.
I
And one
put,
more.
okay. I was gonna say, I put the link to our calendar where all of these live, if people want more information, but continue.
One more thing, if you're interested in this, I'm giving a talk at the Union League on May 20th. That's not right either. Fast. I'm giving a talk at the Union League to the American Legion, of which I am a member, on the evolution of battlefield medicine from the Civil War up to now. I was a medic in Vietnam 55 years ago. So I'll talk about what happened in battlefield medicine in the Civil War. I'll talk about what I dealt with in Vietnam and then show you what's going on now. Now, obviously, it's at the Union League. If you're not a member of the American Legion, that's okay, but they will allow guests in. Just get in touch with me at the email, and I will make sure you can get in to see that talk. And let me give you the right date for it. 20th. 20th. Yeah, May 20th, Monday. And this sporting life is Saturday, the 18th. Okay. At least I've got it right on my calendar. Calendar. All right. Were there other questions?
There were no other
No.
questions, so thank you all for joining us tonight. And
Yeah,
with
thank you.
that, thank you, Joe, for all of this information again. Everybody, I will email tomorrow with a short survey and also with the recording of tonight's presentation.
Which I plan to put on YouTube
Okay,
by the end of the week. You should be able to find it on YouTube if there's anything you want to check on it. I've
wonderful.
got a bunch of stuff. I mentioned A.B. Frost, and I didn't tell you, I've got a half-hour video about him on YouTube where I go through a lot of those cartoons a frame at a time and show you some of his amazing work in the cartoons.
All
Okay,
right. Well, thank you, everybody, for
almost.
joining us. Good night, Joe.
Okay,
Thank you.
good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe, stay well.
Thank you.